So today we're going to be reacting to this video called I Made Famous Logos Ultra Realistic. So let's get right into it.
Over the years, companies have spent millions of dollars turning wonderful logos full of character into this. Fantastic. But during that same time, video games have gone from pixel-pouncing plumbers to mind-blowing realistic experiences. So what would happen if designers were more like game makers? Well, today I'm taking these three simple logos and turning their graphic settings to the extreme. Starting with... So what even is the Starbucks logo exactly? I mean, you'd think it's a mermaid, but it's got two tails. I don't know, maybe Ariel was just popping out of the water for some fresh sun and got plastered with nuclear waste or something. I guess that would kind of explain the green water that she's soaking in. I mean, obviously, of course, apparently it's just a siren. Well, it seems sirens are like evil mermaids. Okay, and they're known for singing enchanting songs to lure sailors to their death. So what I gather is that basically we just need to make a mermaid with two tails, since apparently sirens generally have two tails. Well, I have found this lovely lady for our base model, and we are going to make all her dreams come true by chopping off her legs and replacing them with fishtails. Okay, we will just quickly mask her out, and I'm leaving her a bit bigger than the original simply because every time Starbucks redesigns their logo, it seems like they get more and more and more zoomed in. First off, let's fix this hair situation because hers is way too short right now. Finally, I found this girl who I think has the perfect hair for what we're looking for. So we can just stick her in here, and then I just want to break her up so that both of their hairs align a little more closely. Now, removing the background is easy enough, but I'm no barber. I don't want to spend all day cutting all this hair out from her body. So instead, I'm just going to leave the shoulders alone. I think they look pretty good as they are. Well, maybe I will smooth out this one little area. Then I can just fade out her body to blend that in with our original models. Just being careful to leave these organic shadows intact so I don't have to paint them by hand later. And then we just carefully remove her face. Blending in this hair is actually not that hard either. All you really have to do is make sure your seams fall along the places where the hair naturally has edges. Just like that. And then some shadows right here around the face to help unify everything. And now I dare say that you couldn't even tell that these were two different women stitched together. Ah, dang it. It looks like the hair model was wearing a shirt and you can still see part of that right down here. But maybe I can get rid of that with the healing brush. Or maybe not. But I bet I can copy this part of the hair. Just sort of scooch that down and blend it together. Nice. Now it is possible you might have noticed a big gaping hole right around here. Well, according to the original logo, she's supposed to be
In the nude.
but we keep it family friendly here on YouTube, so
Avada Kedavra.
alrighty, to make this more realistic, I want to have her underwater. Probably ought to remove some of these dots though, so it doesn't look like we're in outer space. But I don't really want to make her surrounded by green water like the original logo. However, I do want some kind of green in here just because that color is really iconic to the Starbucks brand. So I'm thinking we crack open the hair dye. Now turning her hair green isn't really that hard. It's really just a simple hue saturation adjustment layer. Not turning the rest of her body green, well, that's a little more tricky. Obviously we just want to mask out that effect from her skin, which along these edges you know is not really that bad. It's in these areas though that you start to question why you're trying to even do this at all. I mean, because you're not going to try to come in here and paint each individual little hair. Well, I mean, I guess you could do that, but I'm not going to. So instead, I'll just settle on using a soft brush, give it a subtle color fade until it looks good enough. And now maybe just a few extra highlights to really make this stuff pop. Oh, and how about some green eyes to match that hair too? Now let's turn this poor popper into a queen. At least I assume that's why she's wearing a crown. I don't know. Luckily, I found this little guy, which should work as a base. Just need to cut off this bottom section. Oh, and it looks like lightning has struck twice because I found this really cool little starfish ornament that should work perfectly for that central star she's supposed to have. And just a slight adjustment to those colors to make sure everything matches. But I'm afraid that's where the similarities to the original are going to end because I really just don't want to have to come in here and bend these little points to try to match the exact shape of this crown. So instead, I'll just leave it as it is. But I am going to bring in some seashells to make this crown feel more ocean themed. All I have to do thing is make them look gold, which surprisingly isn't too hard. First off, I just need to adjust the hue, turn down the brightness, and one thing about gold is that it generally has these really rich dark areas. So I'm going to use a color burn layer to add some extra darkness in here, and then a blend diff can take that away from the areas that were already highlighted. Another add layer will help me boost those highlights even further. And now that looks like a gold shell if I've ever seen one. I did that exact same process with another shell on this side, and I even added in some starfish too. Painting all the shadows that would be cast by these new items was the final touch needed to make this whole thing feel like a solid unit. Now let's go ahead and mask out this part of the crown so it looks like the hair is in front of it, and just a touch of shadow right under here. And to match the crown, I feel like her top can be golden too. And now we can move on to these tails. Honestly, I'm thinking we just find a fish somewhere to use. We do want those scales to appear decently large though, but if we get a really tiny fish like this little guy, we can just scale him up. And that should give us the exact size we're looking for. We just pop that other one right over here. I think I will get rid of these large shines though, because it just looks a little too slimy to me. Then just some simple lighting to finish it off. Now on the original Starbucks logo, it has her tails directly out to her sides, which I think is just kind of an awkward position. So instead, I want her tails to actually appear behind her. So to do that, I'm gonna add in a focus blur that gets stronger the further it goes back. And then I'll paint some blue on these so it looks like they're fading out into the water. And I can do a similar thing to the crown as well. And I feel like if she truly is underwater, there's no way her hair is going to be this perfect. So I'm going to borrow a couple of other ladies to add some more hair behind her, kind of like it's flowing up and down in the water. And after some minor lighting tweaks, our beautiful Starbucks logo is done. Believe it or not, Jurassic Park was the first movie I ever saw in theaters, and I had literally just been born. So I want to make sure to do this iconic logo justice. So I guess I'll just start with the main circle first. It looks like the real logo isn't even actually a perfect circle, but mine will be. Just duplicate that and size it down. Use that as a mask, and we've got our ring. I think that would look really cool if it was made out of stone. Stretching that all the way down and lightening it up just a bit. Then a small shadow to add some depth. We can add in that smaller ring on the outside with a touch of highlight. Now for the block where this title is supposed to be, I'd like that to be made out of wood. Kind of like we're sticking to the theme of the stone and wood gate in the movie. I just need to adjust it a bit so it's more of a rectangular shape. Then I'll just come in here and add a sharp shadow right underneath to add a sense of depth. And the same thing with a highlight too. Can't forget these little bits on the edges. I do feel like this particular board is just a little too smooth though, so I'm going to bring in a second plank of wood and use that just for the texture. And now for the text. What I like to do is make it look like these letters were hand carved out of the wood. And I have found this super cool sign which has just the look I'm going for. I just need to get rid of these letters first, and then I can drop it right in here as a texture for the letters. Just expand that to fill the entire thing, and then darken it up so we can actually read it. Now to make this look 3D, adding in a little edge bevel does a pretty good job. And for even more depth, an inner shadow will make it feel like these carvings are deep down in this wood. It just needs a little touch up here around the edges. And lastly, just some subtle lighting on this text to help bring out that texture. Now unlike the original logo, where the dinosaur bones seem to be possessed and they're just strolling through a miniature jungle, my dinosaur is going to be found exactly where he belongs, in the dirt. He is kind of cute, isn't he, though? I think I'll call him Carl. Let's just mold Carl to roughly line up with the original logo. Just bend his spine right around like this. And now the main problem is that Carl's arms just don't quite line up with the original. But I'm hoping he doesn't mind if I just cut them off and scooch them right up here. And unless you're Dr. Grant, I really don't think anyone's gonna notice. And I do want to darken him up to help him stand out from the dirt, as well as to better match the original silhouette logo. And we can just start giving him a nice drop shadow, along with some nice lighting on the bones. And now one thing that is kind of bothersome is that all these little tiny bones tend to run together visually, but if we add some highlights to some of these larger features, it kind of just helps break things up so you can focus on these different parts separately. You know, I actually feel like the dirt is way too smooth right now, but adding in some tiny rocks should give the space some really nice detail. Heck, we can even add in some cracks here for a little bit more grit. I went around and masked out parts of the ring to make it look like these rocks were in front of it, which adds to the feeling of depth. And then a nice shadow on the ground and along the inner wall helped tie them together. Now, if we assume these bones were found in the jungle, there's got to be something growing in here, right? So we'll just select all the green bits, and then we can just paint out the areas where we don't want any of this vegetation to show up. And speaking of plants, I want to keep the same idea of using some type of plant life down here at the bottom like the original logo, but my plants are going to be just a tad bigger. This is looking really cool now, but I can't help but thinking that it feels a little too clean. So how about we darken the ring up and then add in some cracks to this stone? You can actually cut away part of this ring too to make it feel like these pieces have fallen out. One more there, a big one down here, and then a highlight across this whole thing should really help those broken edges stand out. And since this is a jungle, maybe we can even bring in some vines here that's growing on the rock. And then one more little guy right over here, and a small little green one to top it all off. I think a touch of moss is the last thing this stone needs to complete its rundown, aged look. And now for one last touch of terror, a giant claw mark ripping through this sign. And with that, our Jurassic Park logo is complete. Before we get to the last logo, if you missed my last video, I started an absolutely insane Discord for designers called Design Island. You can earn coins through design battles, playing custom island games like growing a farm, or catching fish, or even just chatting. Coins can be used to buy portfolio reviews, free design courses, and even lottery tickets for gift cards, software, and iPads. It's completely free, so come on over and join me and the thousands of other people already in there. And last but not least, we have Tesla, the brand of choice if you want to drive your car way off-road. This is certainly the simplest logo in the set, and I have an equally simple idea for it. Tesla makes cars, so let's make this look like a car. Obviously, I'm not going to warp this into the shape of a sedan, but the idea is to just mimic the materials of a car. So I guess these two pieces will just be car panels, and I'm going to fill in this empty space with chrome. And to make it really feel like a car, a headlight. And I mean, that's basically it. Really now, all I need to do is some painting, really just rounding off the shapes. Now normally, these seams between car panels tend to be pretty dark, so if we want a thin dark edge right between here, well, we're not gonna paint it by hand. Instead, we can just select the base logo, contract that selection by a few pixels, and then we can paint perfectly straight black lines. And using that same technique, I can make these nice highlights around the edges as well. And then just fading those out along the edges to form a nice gradient. And then I'd like a hard seam, well, more of a bend really, right down the middle panel here. Give that a touch of blur, fade it out on the ends, and just a touch of yellow here on these highlights to help them pop out. Now to start making this look like car paint, we need a big shine right down the side here. Then fading that out just like this. And I'll put a little bounce light right around the edges here, because the more reflections we have, the shinier this thing is gonna look. And it wouldn't be high-end car paint without some metal flakes. I actually don't know if Tesla uses metal flakes in their car paint, but I think it looks cool, so here we are. And a little light in here or there just to punch things up, and that part is pretty much done. And now rendering out realistic chrome is actually a lot simpler than you'd think. It's really just all about the layering. Take this rectangle for example. If we start with a dark bottom and a light streak right at the top, it already starts to look like it's made of metal. But if you add some bounce lighting under here, maybe a layer of transition, and even a secondary highlight at the top, you start to get something that looks pretty convincing when you zoom out, which are the exact same steps I did to get this right here. Then I can just come in and add some gradients to this to create some different transitions. Now I probably could spend a bunch of time trying to make a custom headlight for this, but I think it would just end up solid white anyways, especially if the light is on. So instead, I'm just going to take the lazy man's way out and just add some bloom with a light flare for a little. And after a couple final tweaks, this is our redesigned logo for Tesla, which honestly ended up just looking like Iron Man. But please subscribe so Carl doesn't have to keep crying himself to sleep every night.
How big is a shark?
So yeah, that will be the end of the video. See you in the next video. Bye.